Hello everyone, Douglas here and welcome to my movie review, and today I will be reviewing The Incredible Hulk. This movie is the second movie for the MCU, and this movie is written by Zak Penn and directed by Louis Leterrier. Leterrier was a fan of both the film and TV series, and Jon Favreau took him on. Zak Penn, who drafted the 1996 movie, said the film would follow up Hulk, but stressed it would be more tonally similar to the TV show and Bruce Jones's run on the comic. Our opening scene begins with the title sequence, and I loved the title sequence as a kid. In the title sequence, we see Bruce Banner, played by Edward Norton, and we see scientists examining him, and we see him turned into something. We see a metronome clicking, and we see Bruce stops it, and we see a caption that says, "Days Without Incident, 158. We are in, I am so gonna mispronounce this, Rochila Flavor in Brazil. And we see Bruce is living in Brazil. We do get a cameo from Bill Bixby, who played the Hulk in the TV series. We see Bruce is trying to speak Portuguese. We do see Bruce is learning martial arts. We see Bruce is at work, and he works at a bottling soda company. We see a control box sparkling, and Bruce is fixing it. We see Bruce gets electrocuted, and we see his blood, and it falls. And we see Bruce is looking for it, and he found it. But he missed one, and it landed on one of the bottles. We see a guy harassing Martina, and we see Bruce sees this, and we see the guy is being mean. A funny line from Bruce when he says, "Don't make me hungry. You wouldn't like me when I'm hungry." Do you mean angry? Since I'm reading this, that should be a Snickers commercial. Hey, you don't want to make me hungry. Hey, eat a Snickers. You say that when you get hungry. Okay, that is funny when I hear that. We see the boss prevents the fight. We see Bruce is setting up something, and he is talking to someone named Mr. Blue. And we see Bruce has a flower, and we do see him doing experiments. We see he tries to get his blood back to normal, and at first he does succeed, and then it turns back into green. We do see the person wants to meet with Bruce. We do see the person wants the blood sample. We are in Arlington, Virginia, at the Pentagon. We are introduced to Theodorus Ross, played by William Hurt. We also get a cameo of Stan Lee. And we see Stan Lee has the sodas from Brazil, and he drinks it, and he drops the bottle. We see that Ross knows that Bruce is in Brazil. We are at Fort Johnson, Everglades. We are introduced to Emil Blonsky, played by Tim Roth. We see the army plane is going to Brazil, and we find out from Ross, prank Bruce, and bring him back. We find out from Mr. Blue that preliminary blood tests show significant gamma reduction. We see Ross and his troops are in a van, and they are in Brazil. We see Bruce's dog hear something. We see the troops blow the door, and we find out he escaped. We see Bruce is hiding himself. We see the troops recognize him, and they go after him. We hear a device, and we see Bruce's heart rate is up to 175. We see the heart rate drops. We see Ross sees Bruce for the first time in years. We see Bruce runs into the guy from work and his friend, and he is being mean, and Bruce fights them, and they chase him. We see Bruce ran back to the factory, and we find out Bruce's heart rate is now 187. We see Bruce is surrounded by the guy's gang. We see Bruce is warning him that he will get angry. We see the guy punches Bruce, and his heart rate is now 200. And now he becomes the Hulk, and he grabs and throws the guy. We see Wasp orders to trank him, and that doesn't work. We see the Hulk is taking out the soldiers, and they start to shoot him. We see Wasp is going through Bruce's stuff, and he wants to see if he was talking to anyone. We see that Wasp is telling Blonsky that the Hulk was Bruce. We see that Wasp is giving up, and he is going home. We see Bruce wakes up near a waterfall, and we see the caption, "Days Without Incident, going back to 1." We see Bruce sees a truck approaching and he stops it. And we find out he is in Guatemala. Back in the US, we find out from Blonsky he wants to go after him. We are in Chiapas, Mexico. We see a young boy gives Bruce coins. We see Bruce get some new clothes. We are at Calvary University, Virginia. We see Bruce Banner is back in the US and back to where it all started. And we see Days Without Incident 17. We see Bruce sees the name Dr. Elizabeth Wasp. And we see Dr. Elizabeth Wasp, played by Liv Taylor. We do see that Betty might recognize Bruce, but instead, she has a boyfriend named Leonard Sampson, played by Ty Burrell. And oh boy, that's not good. We see Bruce is at Stanley's, and we see Stanley, and he recognizes Bruce. We find out that Bruce needs a bed for a night, and Stanley gives him the room upstairs. We see Bruce is delivering pizza to Betty, and we get a cameo of Faringo as a security guard. We see Bruce bribes him with the pizza. We see Bruce is having flashbacks when he became the Hulk. We see Bruce is doing research and the data is gone. We do see him talking to Mr. Blue and tells him. We see Betty is at Stan's with Leonard. We see Betty sees Bruce for the first time in years and he is gone. We see Bruce is walking and we see a car behind him and Betty followed him. We see them reunite. We see that Betty wants Bruce to come with him. We find out Betty had the data. We see Wasp is getting something from the storage freezer. We find out that Bruce is going to get on the bus, and you can tell Betty has feelings for him. We see Blonsky is wearing no shirt, and we find out from Ross he is going to give him a very low dose. We see the scientists are injecting him with a serum. We see Bruce and Betty are walking, and we see that they know Bruce is here, and he tells Betty to run, and Bruce is on the run. We find out that Blonsky has the super soldier serum, and he is running really fast. We see Bruce puts the data in his mouth. We see that Betty knows that her dad is in there. We see the soldiers got him locked in. Oh, do they? We see Ross orders 2 canisters in there, and we see smoke. We see Bruce turns into the Hulk. We see Ross orders the soldiers to shoot him, and to be honest, how dumb is Ross? Because that is something you do not want to do. We see Blonsky shoots the Hulk. We see Ross orders them to fire the cannons, and we see the Hulk is knocked down, but gets back up. We see Blonsky goes up to the Hulk and Ross orders him to pull back, but ignores the order, and he gets knocked into a tree, and Ross orders fall back. We see the gunship is coming in, and the Hulk protects Betty, and they are both engulfed in flames. We see the Hulk leaves with Betty in his arms. We are at Betty's house, and we do see Leonard is not happy with Wasp, and he knows the Hulk protected her. I like Leonard's line when he says, "You know, it's a point of professional pride with me that I can always tell when somebody's lying. We see the Hulk is in the woods and in a cave. We see Betty wakes up and Betty knows that is Bruce. A great scene I like when we see the Hulk throws a rock and we see lightning and he roars. We do see Blonsky is seriously injured and we see his fingers move and we see him awake. We see Betty sees Bruce is back to normal. We are at a motel and we hear Bruce throws up and he has the data. We see Ross sees the news about the incident at Calvary University. At the motel, we do see that Betty still loves Bruce and they kiss. We see Ross sees that Blonsky is healed. We do see Ross is going to track Bruce, and we find out Bruce wants to meet Mr. Blue. We do see Blonsky is going under another injection. We find out from Betty that there is traffic and something is going on. We see that Bruce and Betty are on a boat, and they are going to New York. We see Bruce and Betty are in a taxi, and the taxi driver is bad at his job. We are introduced to Dr. Samuel Stearns, played by Tim Blake Nelson, and we find out from Bruce he is Mr. Blue because he is wearing blue. We find out from Dr. Stearns that the cure could kill him. At the base, we see Blonsky is looking at himself in the mirror, and there is something wrong with him, and we see him change. We see Dr. Stearns is getting the procedure ready. We see Dr. Stearns is doing the procedure. We see Dr. Stearns did electric shock therapy, and he is transforming into the Hulk. We do see the antidote worked, and he is back to normal. I love Dr. Stearns' line when he says, "That was the most extraordinary thing I have seen in my entire life." We find out Dr. Stearns had test subjects, and there was a lot. We see the army arrive at Dr. Stearns' place. We see Bruce tells Dr. Stearns to destroy it. We see Blonsky is going after them. We see someone tranks Bruce. Finally. We see Blonsky arrives and he knocks out Bruce. We see Blonsky is aiming a gun towards Dr. Stearns, and we find out he wants to see him out of him. We find out from Dr. Stearns that the mixture of that could be an abomination. We see Dr. Stearns is giving Blonsky the Hulk serum. We see Blonsky transforms into the Abomination. We see the soldiers are trying to kill it. We see the Abomination destroying the city. We see that Bruce wants to go back so he can fight the Abomination, and Betty is worried that he can't control it. We see Bruce tells Ross to open the door. We see Betty doesn't want him to do it, but Bruce has to try. We see Bruce jumps out of the plane and he lands hard, and he becomes the Hulk. We see the Hulk and the Abomination start fighting. We see Ross is helping the Hulk. We see the Abomination jumps onto a helicopter and the Hulk grabs him by the feet, and they are hanging on, but they are too heavy and they crash. We see that Ross and Betty survived, and the fight continues. We see the Abomination is winning. We see the fire and the fuel are leaking from the helicopter, and then the Hulk puts it out. We see the Abomination ask Ross for any last words, and the Hulk's first words are, "Hulk smash!" And we see the Hulk gets the upper hand and he wins. We see the helicopter shines a light on the Hulk, and he runs, and he looks back and then jumps. The next morning, we see Betty, and she sees her picture of Bruce, and the camera dies. We are at Bella Coola, British Columbia. We see Bruce is at his cabin and he mails the necklace to Betty. We see Bruce is meditating. We see Days Without Incident at 31 and now back to 0. And that is the end. At the post-credit scene, we see Ross at a bar and we see Tony Stark played by Robert Downey Jr. and he is telling him why the Super Soldier program was put on hold. We see Tony is telling Ross that he is putting a team together, and that is the end. I will say, it is a good movie, and is it perfect? Absolutely not. I will say, it's not bad. It's better than I remember it to be. The reason why I think it doesn't score a classic status for me because you have a monster that cannot control himself and he is living with a curse. If I want a really good movie, I want good lines that are memorable, and to be honest, there were hardly any good lines in this movie, but there were only a few. But I did find the movie entertaining, actually. I will give The Incredible Hulk an 8 out of 10. So that is my review of The Incredible Hulk. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And I will see you next time when we kick off Series 4 of Doctor Who with the Christmas special, Voyage of the Damned.